All right, perfect. Here we go. So, Matt, how did you? It looks like you finally got your power back. Yeah.
Yes, the electricity gods Thor and Odin and Zeus have been happy enough to let me live in my own home again. So it's been fantastic.
So, how was the last couple of days at the in-law? Or no, it wasn't the in-laws. It was your parents that you guys stayed at. Yeah.
Oh, it was bliss. It was just like when I was 15. I felt at home again, literally.
I mean, one of the things that I hate more than anything is whenever I go back home. I mean, I live mostly in Europe, right? But if I ever travel back to Philly, I basically end up usually staying at my parents' place. I mean, anytime I go back stateside, usually to New York for work, and I don't run through Philly, I end up getting stuck there for a little bit. And you know what? It's nice seeing my mom. If I ever get back and don't see her, she always just yells at me. But I mean, I can only spend maybe a day or two at my parents' place before. I mean, doesn't matter how old you get, mothers never stop mothering. It's wild. Um, like it goes back to the days that we were in high school. Oh yeah, you know what? What is the? Who are you meeting? Where are you? Don't drink and drive. What time are you going to be home? It's just crazy. Anyways, I mean, Niko, thank you for joining us today. A pleasure to have you on. Maybe perhaps if you want to, just for our audience, if you could do a quick introduction, that would be a great way for us to get started.
Sure thing. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's nice to meet you guys. I'm Niko Jilch. I'm sitting here in Vienna, Austria. By occupation, I'm a journalist, financial journalist. I've been covering the financial markets and crisis after crisis and the central bank stuff and the gold stuff and of course the Bitcoin stuff for about it's almost going to 15 years now. And for the last 1.5 years, I've been out on my own, basically a one person media business, doing YouTube, doing podcast, doing a newsletter. It's called fixthemoney.net. That's my English channel. It also has a podcast. And my main channel is actually in German, because I fell into the whole Bitcoin rabbit hole in 2020. I've been on and off and buying Bitcoin, holding it from 13, but not holding it for long, just trading and doing stupid things. But when
Don't
I
you
fell
know you're
into
just supposed to hodl it, right? You don't do the trading. We trade shit coins and hodl Bitcoin.
the thing is that when I started, there wasn't even like the hodl thing, right? And I always say that the main problem that in retrospect, that I've identified, besides me being a shit trader, is that I was a journalist at the daily newspaper, and when you work on a daily schedule, everything is about what is happening right now. So when the price is going up, so the first time I wrote about Bitcoin in 2013, when the price is going up, I think it was up to 750 euros back then. Everybody's interested. Yeah. So everybody's interested. And of course I would buy, that would be the moment when I say, okay, if I write about this, I should buy it, right? So I buy it 750, and then 5 minutes later it crashes 90%. And then of course you lose interest because there's other things to do and other things to cover. And this happened a couple of times. And then in 2016, 17, especially 17, 18, with all the ICO, Ethereum craze, there was like a new blockchain every other day. And then you had to write about that. And everybody was, and one thing I learned about the bull markets is that everybody thinks they go on forever, but like after 2 months, it's over. And then after the big bull market of 2017, I actually covered, as an investigative journalist, I covered a huge scandal that's basically like a proper Ponzi scheme that a couple of guys from Austria were very involved with, and lots of people in Austria, Germany, and down to Turkey lost lots of money. And we're talking about 200 million euros at
Which one was
the
this?
height of the market. It was called Optioment.
Yeah, I remember that one.
There are so many, and it was just an MLM market. It was basically just people you get people to events, and you would set up Bitcoin ATMs where they would feed their hard-earned cash into, and then you tell them, we trade for you, we make more of it, but we have to keep it for at least a year, right? And then I literally found out that there is like you can buy basically a WordPress for a Ponzi scheme, right? there's the whole back end where you show people what they've earned, but in reality, the Bitcoin went to these founders or these criminals directly. Well, I only say this because, of course, this also turned me off to the whole concept. I was very early into Austrian economics. I was into gold. I was into the whole critique of the monetary system, of inflation. I knew that it all. Maybe I was in there too early because of the gold stuff, but I was very I didn't focus on Bitcoin. I started focusing on Bitcoin in 2020, and then everything went very quickly because I saw that the German market or the German community is now really evolving. And German, is a language spoken by only 100 million people, which of course is a lot smaller than the English market. But it's 100 million very interested people, and people also who have money to invest. So
Yep.
it's a pretty good market.
I mean, at the end of the day, I think German. I mean, I don't want to speak for Germans. Obviously, my wife's German. That's about as. I mean, I've lived here for 7 or 8 years, but haven't exactly acclimated myself to German culture outside of the schnitzel and beer, right? But I mean, Germans seemingly have a better understanding of fundamental savings, I think, than most cultures. I think that would be accurate to say, right? Like my wife, when I told her, when her and I were first exploring getting married, and mind you, this was like, God, almost 10 years ago, I guess, at this time. And we were trying to figure out how to make it work. Where were we going to live? How were we going to make a wedding work? And naturally, we just never even really had one. We just did a courthouse thing, more or less. But we started looking at each other's finances. And she's a little bit younger than I am. And I was working in private equity at the time. And I remember I was showing her, like, I was trying to explain to her how carry worked on some of the investments I had made from private equity. Just went over her head. She didn't get it. But then I showed her my old Roth IRA from the years that I was at PwC. And she couldn't believe how irresponsible I was, that I had money locked up in ETFs managed by Vanguard or BlackRock or some of these large players. Because, I mean, how stupid could I be for ever putting money on stocks? Stocks just always go to zero. It's insane for me to ever put money on there. Naturally, she's learned over time, being married with me, she's learned a little bit more about finance and Bitcoin, I think, than she ever anticipated. But for her, and I think it is to a certain extent a German thing, like it's just more comfortable to think of money sitting in the bank, or even better, just money under your mattress to a certain extent. Yeah.
It's absolutely a German thing. It's a cultural thing on the one side. So you have the whole Protestant work ethic, which basically goes like you're born, you work, you save, you never spend the money, then you die. This goes on for
My wife's
generations.
family in a nutshell.
Exactly, and we in Austria are Catholics. We're a little bit more relaxed with everything. So we were like more the southern, Germans. But
Mhm.
and this is extremely true. But here in Austria as well. So basically, people still save on the savings account, right? And what you described, index investing, right? What Jack Bolton came up with in the 1970s. Of course, when did he come up with it in the 1970s? Shortly after Nixon ended the gold standard, right? Immediately
Yep.
he gets to work and comes up with the index fund. The index fund is basically the closest thing you get to a savings account that actually works. In this pure fiat environment. But Germans and Austrians, especially after the war, they have this inflation angst that's still, very much real because of the hyperinflation between the two big wars. But after the war, when in the time of the Wirtschaftswunder, people put a lot of trust into the Deutschmark, which was the fiat currency of the time, and it was always one of the hardest currencies. So they were able to actually save in that money, and the same goes for Austrians. We had the shilling. So have you ever heard about the Weltspartag, the World Savings Day?
Yes, of course. I don't know it in German, but
Do
English.
you know
Yeah.
when? Yeah, but you know what the date of the World Savings Day is?
No, I can't say that
I'll
I do
tell you.
actually.
So the World Savings Days is a thing that they came up with in the 1930s, but I think the only parts of the world that actually still celebrate this, and it's like in the banks and whatever, are Germany and Austria. So the date of the World Savings Day is October 31st.
Halloween.
Halloween.
it's the day that Satoshi published the white paper.
Ah, I never actually would have thought
It's
about
Halloween,
that.
yes.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
so do you think Satoshi, whoever they may or may not have been, had that in mind whenever they made that?
Well, there's the second theory is about the Martin, not Martin, yes, Martin Luther. So Martin Luther was the guy who came up with the idea of taking down the Catholic Church, right? The Protestant.
Yeah, nailing the
That's how
theses on the door.
Exactly. That was also on October 31st.
Mm-hmm.
And
So that's
and
the one that I'm familiar with.
That was also on October 31st. And the thing is that that the day that Martin Luther was officially expelled from the Catholic Church is the day that Satoshi started the Genesis block.
January 3rd, then, yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So,
exactly.
Okay, so I knew about the Martin Luther thing. I did not know about the expelling of the church. I never knew that date, and I never knew the date of this World Savings Day. But, I mean, you've now convinced me that Satoshi had to have been German, basically, right?
Well, there's
That's
one more.
That's three
little
coincidences,
hint.
right?
Sorry? Well, there's one more little hint. So there's one more little hint. Satoshi published the white paper, and he used a GMX address. And GMX is a German provider of like email provider that was very popular in like the noughties, right? Before Gmail came around. It's still very
I see
popular.
A lot of friends that have like it's like the gmx.de domain, right? It's like the old German version of Yahoo, more or less. Yeah.
So it was like AOL. It was like AOL, but German
Something
online.
Like that. It was not like AOL. They were not like a service provider, but they just were the first ones to like basically bring webmail to the Germans.
Okay.
Wasn't there a guy a few years back? For the life of me, I don't remember his name, but he had like this. He was German. I think he was from Berlin. Had this long, flowing hair, and he was claiming to be Satoshi. What the hell was his name?
Oh wow, I don't know.
I mean, obviously, it was completely debunked.
Like a celebrity?
No, there was a guy. I remember that. I remember that there was a guy. Yeah, there was a guy, but I don't remember his name. So I mean, I'm not saying that Satoshi is German. Absolutely not. I don't know anything. And there's other like strong hints, of course, going to the British, and there's strong hints going to even Japan. But those, I mean, he must have known something at least about if it's not World Savings Day, at least about the Martin Luther thing and the Reformation thing, but that's not something that you only know when you live in Germany, right?
I mean, that's the first time that I've heard of it, and I've been living here for 7 or 8 years. Granted, I don't speak German, so maybe that's the reason I never go to a bar and have that conversation. So coming back,
but I have to say, I'm sorry for interrupting, but really, I mean that the German savings culture is extreme, and I'll send you a link. There is Holger von Grossig, who was an author. He has done a great little blog post on how Bitcoin is bringing back savings culture, and he's doing this from a German perspective. I'll send you the link afterwards. You can put it in the show notes. It's really, really interesting, and he has done a whole like study of. You should probably just have it on the podcast at some point. He's done a whole.
I was actually going to say it sounds like a perfect guest.
He has done a whole study of saving throughout like the centuries, right? And there's this little interesting thing that I just have to get out there. It's these I don't know if you had that have that in the US, but in Germany you would put your money into a pig, right? A Sparschwein, which is a savings pig, right?
Oh,
don't ask me why it's a pig. A piggy bank.
I got one right here somewhere.
Okay, get the piggy bank. I want to see it.
I mean, I just use a jar nowadays.
Yeah, exactly. But this is also interesting. All right, so can you open the piggy bank?
Sure.
No,
the bottom.
Exactly. That's what I want to talk about. So the piggy bank, originally, you destroyed it.
Yeah.
When you wanted to get the money out. That's what you still see in the comics, right? When like Tick when they want to get their money out, they destroy it. So he told me that they added the little squishy thing at the bottom that you can just screw out. Yeah, they added that in the 1970s, also after the Nixon shock, because people were more frequently taking the money out because of the inflation.
That
that
damn
makes a hell of a
Nixon
lot of
ruined
sense.
our piggy banks.
Okay,
Much
sorry.
more than that. No, though, that's a very interesting analogy. So what was the name of the website that you have that you mentioned earlier, the English one?
So my English channel is called Fix the Money, and the website is fixthemoney.net. I didn't get the
So what is
.com.
your
It's
general
.net.
thesis around what's needed to fix the money then, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, the thing I've basically came full circle. So I started with thinking that we should go back to a gold standard. Then I
Mm-hmm.
thought that we need some sort of at least relationship to gold. There's like a whole rabbit hole when you want to go down the whole rabbit hole of the euro and gold, because the euro is actually backed by 13,000 tons of gold, which is almost a third more than the US has. But in the
Yep.
official statistics, it always says US has the most gold because it goes by countries. But of course, the eurozone is not a country. But that's like
I
the
mean, I think a lot of it is also the U.S. has a significant amount of gold they're custodying on behalf of other nations,
that is
and they
also
actually
true.
they use a portion of that gold in that statistic saying it's U.S. gold, but it's really just gold in custody that the U.S. has.
Yeah, the thing with gold, and this is also something that we might even see with Bitcoin at some point. The thing with gold is you never know, you do a snapshot here and then you do a snapshot the other day, and you don't know if it's the same gold that was just used for two different institutions, but whatever. So because you asked what needs to be done, and I came full circle. So I started out, which is basically the default. It's like, oh my God, there is a problem. The government needs to fix it. And now I came to the point where it's like, oh my God, there's a problem. I can only fix it for myself, and this is the only thing I can do. I cannot. I can I can try and scream at somebody or talk to somebody or lobby somebody, but in the end, the only life you control is your own. And this very much fits with Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is something that any individual can use on an individual basis. And also, and I think this is very important, it's probably the only asset that I can use at the same level of quality and access as a nation state or a George Soros or
Mm,
a BlackRock. I can hold my own keys. uh, Actually, the nation state has more problems holding their keys, because they need to come up with a system where it's not some guy just running away with it, right?
yeah.
um, and this is fascinating for me, and it took me 7 years to really believe in Bitcoin as a system that is here to stay, and that has the power to at least you know do some good in the world. I'm not saying we're going to fix everything, but I think that, so the fix the money really is, you need to fix your money, not you need to fix your own life basically first, and then the rest comes afterwards. So I of course I'm looking at what El Salvador does and what other countries do, and of course it's important to see institutions like BlackRock and in the end central banks embracing Bitcoin, but it levels the playing field, and that's the important thing. And you can use it today, and then, like, once you do this, you see this whole new world of people who are actually optimistic and want to build into the future, and that's really great.
I mean, so one of the things that I think is severely undervalued from a societal and a political perspective is the sovereignty of the individual. Because exactly like you initially started saying, like, yeah, whenever something goes wrong, okay, go to the government. What can the government do to fix this? And that's kind of been the default for a while. And while that mentality might not be wrong in certain circumstances. I mean, just as I've aged in my understanding of how the world works, or at least how I perceive how the world works, uh, the government ends up, especially my government, seemingly creating significantly more problems than they actually genuinely end up solving. I mean, I think, I forget who said it, but I mean, if you give the government if you give them unrelinquished power over certain problems, they're just going to end up creating their own problems to gain more power, right?
It
And
was Milton Friedman said, if you put the government in charge of the desert, they'll run out of sand. Yeah.
he was probably right. So The sovereignty of the individual, I think, just even over the last few years, and it certainly is preeminent in the Bitcoin community, is becoming a more pronounced mentality that people have. But the problem that I see with that on a large scale is it also implies self responsibility. You really have to become responsible for yourself. You have to take ownership of your actions. You have to take ownership of your thoughts. You have to take ownership of, you know what, things might not work out in my life, and I'm just going to have to be okay with that. And I have to take responsibility for myself rather than blaming others. And I think that's very difficult to do at a mass scale because, I mean, people just, like individuals, I like to believe are smart, but people in general are really just fucking dumb collectively, I think. But one of the benefits of Bitcoin is that it truly allows people to be their own bank. It allows them the opportunity to take that fiscal responsibility of managing and owning their own assets, unseizable, uncensorable assets. I mean, this is where Bitcoin is the only individually sovereign currency in the world. Maybe there's value in that. I personally see value in that. I'm sure others don't, but I mean, it sounds as though your assumption largely is that, I mean, Bitcoin is a viable alternative currency that could fix the money in the world.
In two ways, really. That's why I like the fix the money thing, because first you fix it like you fix a car, but you also fix the supply. And that's actually how you fix the money, by fixing the supply. It's the complete opposite of the system we live in today. Today we expand the supply, and we are taught that you need to expand the supply. And my argument is always, well, if that's true, then Bitcoin is not going to work. You know, if that but
it can't work.
But the thing is that technically, before Bitcoin, a deflationary world was also not really possible, because you cannot go below a cent, right? Maybe you could introduce a new form of like millicents, but it's a deflationary world, especially that is controlled by the government or like a central bank, is basically impossible. And it was also impossible with gold, because with gold, at some point it's just dust and then it goes away. So it doesn't work like that. With Bitcoin, you can actually have that, but I don't want to go that far. So the thing is that I like thinking in these absolute terms and in these big picture things. But right now, and probably for most of our lifetime, Bitcoin would just play the role of being an alternative for the small amount of people who actually care and who actually do have the capacity to take responsibility for their own action. And it always sounds, taking responsibility always sounds so scary, right? But the thing is, it's like with anything,
especially for people in my generation and younger.
Yeah, but the thing is, once you start doing something that you thought you couldn't do, and then you realize this works, then you get more confident. And the funny thing with Bitcoin is that it lures you in, and with crypto in general, it lures you in with the promise of riches, right? That's how 99% get in, and then you buy that thing and you put it on a hardware wallet. And lo and behold, you just took responsibility for your own money and your own life, but you didn't think about it before. So and if you stick with it, it will change you. I don't know where we're going to go with this, but there is the concept. I think it comes from Nassim Taleb, who has changed his mind about Bitcoin.
Yep.
Will probably change it again. But he came up with this idea of the intolerant minority. So basically, if there is a small minority in the population that absolutely insists on a thing, the thing is going to happen. I think that I don't know if it's true, but I think the example that is always given is that anything that you will buy in a British supermarket is going to be kosher and halal. Because it's just easier to make it all after these rules than have a different lines of products. Lagarde said this, if there is an escape, it will be used, and Bitcoin is this escape for the people. And I think it's extremely important. look at how the system is going. We don't know if we survive another big shock like we had in '08 or in 2020. So it's very good to have something that you can use today as an alternative. You can also see Bitcoin as basically the market answering to bureaucracy, corruption, and red tape. At some point, it just gets too much. And I mean, we've talked about Bitcoin in a very, we're in the middle of it now. But when you think about it, like, I don't know, Pat, how old are you?
34.
34. So you're a little bit younger. I'm 40. So if you would have told me in 1998 that now we have email and this is going to change the world, and then we're going to have some sort of money on the internet, I would have said, yeah, makes sense, right? And now, and this is also what Jack Dorsey talks about, right? The internet does need a monetary layer, and the possibilities that if you combine the internet with a native money, I mean, they really are endless. Think about the billions of people who live in broken systems, who have no chance to actually make something out of it. They want to take responsibility for their own lives, but they can't. So this is something that I see very positively.
I mean, crypto is the only technology, and maybe it's Bitcoin, maybe it's another altcoin. I don't know. My money's on Bitcoin, between all the major layer one protocols that are out there. But I think that's the only technology right now that can solve that problem, that can give that type of financial access to billions and billions of people. Like we've always talked about banking the unbanked and what the complexities are from that, from emerging economies to corrupt economies, et cetera. Billions of people living like this that have no way to truly access a financial ecosystem. But hey, now you have Bitcoin, now you have cryptocurrencies where not only are these people able to effectively bank themselves, assuming they have assuming they have an internet connection. I mean, that is an assumption you have to make here. But assuming they have an internet connection, they not only are their own bank, but they can participate in what inevitably, I believe, becomes the largest wealth generation tool of human history. And I think that happens in Bitcoin, and I think that happens in cryptocurrencies. I mean, it's kind of astounding when you really think about it. But I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to end up running into all of the regulatory and compliance issues around that. AML is going to become the enemy of crypto to a certain extent because, I mean, this is going to be the excuse the larger powers that be, the larger banking powers that be, use to stop emerging economies, those mom and pops in Africa and Latin America and Southeast Asia, for instance, from participating in that global economy. They're just going to say, no, it's only used for money laundering. No, terrorists can access it. It's used for drug and human trafficking. Therefore, we can't allow it, full stop. When the reality is yeah, that's going to happen. There's no way that you can ever stop that, I think. But having a transparent, open, and accessible global financial ecosystem, I think, is a significant net positive when you compare it to the theoretical net negatives that crime could use these assets for. Wouldn't you agree?
Crime uses cash too, though. So it's like, that's sort of a red herring argument in my opinion.
I mean, I agree entirely. What is it? 98%, 99% of dollars in circulation have trace amounts of cocaine on it or something like that. Now it's probably fentanyl.
This only goes to the whole story about people who want to think for themselves or not, These arguments will only work with people who just want some sort of argument while they don't have to deal with this right now.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why in the Bitcoiners talk about FUD, like fear, uncertainty, doubt. This is a concept, but it comes from somewhere, and the people who for some reason or another do not like Bitcoin are still in the phase of just throwing shit at it and see what sticks. And many things do stick when you talk to people who are not interested in the topic at all. They will know all these bad things, especially in the bear market.
So what is it like for you being a journalist and seemingly a very financial and Bitcoin crypto focused journalist? On the positive side, well, pretty much 95% of your counterparts, at least the non-native crypto journalists, are seemingly very anti-Bitcoin, very anti-crypto. It's really only the independent journalists that are relatively pro to a certain extent, right? The mainstream is weaponized against it.
Yes. This is. I mean, structurally, it's because people who become journalists are also people who do not want to take responsibility for their own lives. They want to tell other people how to live their lives. It's basically the same people who become journalists, become university professors, teachers. That's
So
like the
those that
main
can't
rule,
do
right?
journalism.
Yeah, but so what I do is so I am a strict Bitcoin maximalist. I do not deal with anything else. If you will ask me what do I think about Ethereum, I will tell you it's a scam and it's going to disappear, and anybody who's involved with it will lose all their money. Which ironically is the same arguments that people make against Bitcoin coming from the normie world. I do see
Yeah.
that. I do see that irony. But it's for me I still have like one leg in like the normie media world, and I didn't only leave it because of Bitcoin. I also left it because it's dying anyway.
Yeah.
But I think what's important is that there's a clear message, and my clear message is I cannot tell you about crypto, but I can tell you about Bitcoin. And most people confronted with actual arguments are going to listen because they can feel that you're not gonna just let it go, right? I'm not gonna just let it go. And even if I talk to, like yesterday, now in Austria we have a cash debate, right? The government wants to actually protect cash because they are afraid of the digital euro.
Mm.
Like some states are afraid of the central bank digital currencies in the
I mean, DeSantis in Florida, they banned any CBDC that could ever occur. We definitely got to talk about that later. I would love your thoughts there.
And I actually talked to somebody from the Austrian Central Bank yesterday, and he knew that I'm the Bitcoin guy and the gold guy, and I told him, yeah, but I also like cash. I'm totally with if you ask me if we should keep cash or not, I will tell everybody to keep cash. And he's like, interesting, yeah. And then I say, yeah, because it's the same thing as Bitcoin. And then of course his face froze again. But I confront people with that, and I mean, the fact that Larry Fink is now on CNBC talking positively about Bitcoin really helps when it comes to the whole reputation game, right?
Yeah.
Because now I know, I mean, it really is embraced by the establishment. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing long term for Bitcoin, but I can tell, but like narrative wise, things are already changing, and this combined with a possible bull market will give us, lots of positive narratives as well.
So, I mean, for me, politically, I'm just a libertarian, right? So for me, Bitcoin is the only cryptocurrency that really kind of spoke my language to a certain extent. It was the only cryptocurrency that enabled the type of monetary policy, the type of fiscal policy that I would like to see implemented. But with that said, my ideology also says that I also believe that the individual should be enabled to choose which layer one, which crypto they feel works or best identifies for whatever their values may or may not be. It's not I mean, while I think Bitcoin is best, and I'm not necessarily willing to call Ethereum a scam by any means, I'm also not willing to shun somebody if they think that Ethereum offers some sort of utility or functionality or whatever it is that maybe Bitcoin just doesn't, and therefore they go with it. Just because I disagree with them fundamentally doesn't mean I don't understand their logic of being in that Ethereum or being in another crypto. But with that said, I think this next the next bull cycle that I think we're going to be going under, because we're seeing the layer twos being built on Bitcoin, because we're seeing the Lightning Network start to deliver on the promises that it has from a scalability standpoint, because we're seeing a mass exodus of developers from some of the other major shitcoins, maybe not really Ethereum, but just pick a name out of the top 50, and a lot of them are now coming over to Bitcoin. I believe, or at least my thesis, as we go into the next halvening cycle, which is going to be in 9 months or so, I guess at this point, I believe the next cycle isn't not just necessarily going to be driven by Bitcoin, because every cycle is inevitably driven by Bitcoin. But the last cycle was driven by Bitcoin, compounded by the functionality that was being built on Ethereum and some of the other layer ones. We're going to see Bitcoin drive the cycle because of the halvening, and it's going to have the development that Ethereum realized a few years ago built on top of it over the next year or two. I think we're really hitting that tipping point where functionality and utility is getting built on top of Bitcoin. Throw the fact in that you have Larry Fink and BlackRock and all of the other major asset managers talking about this. Throw in the fact that it's going to be an election year. And while, at least in the US, the two major candidates, Biden and Trump, are not talking about Bitcoin for obvious reasons, the three people behind them, RFK, DeSantis, and even Vivek Ramaswamy, to a certain extent, Bitcoin's a major part of their pitch right now. I think we're about to hit the perfect storm for what will be the true beginning of the Bitcoin adoption cycle.
I couldn't have said it any better. I agree 100% with the whole story, why the next cycle is going to be driven by Bitcoin. And there is the establishment stuff, there is also, we talked about the journalists. There are journalists who get it, right? I forgot his name, but there's this guy on Squawk Box on CNBC who is great. There's the older guy.
Yeah, it's
who read the Bitcoin Standard. Yeah. He's absolutely hilarious. I love the guy. And so there are people there. And then it all goes very quickly because you see, when a new technology, ironically, you've seen it with crypto before, with blockchain, but when a new technology gets adopted by the mainstream, young people and other people will see their chance to make it a career, make a career out of it within their organization. Who's the guy? Who's the crypto guy? Who's the Bitcoin guy? Let's talk to him. So yeah, absolutely. And the whole debate between Bitcoin and the other coins, it's just that I decided for me, if I want to do this, like facing the world and talk about Bitcoin and crypto, I need a very clear message. Because even technically, I cannot, as a journalist, I cannot cover 20,000 different cryptocurrencies and their promises.
Oh, it's impossible.
And it's very important for me, very, very important, that when something like FTX happens or when something like Luna happens, I can point to the fact that I always told them stick with Bitcoin. Because people do not, the problem is that, and I've seen this many times with myself as well, it's like people come to Bitcoin and they think they're too late. So they look for the next Bitcoin thing, right? The next, because they want to be smart.
There is no next Bitcoin. That's what people don't.
No, of course not. Of course not. But
they've tried
but
that.
That's
How many times has Bitcoin been forked?
No, but it's true, but it's a mental thing, right? When you are, like we talked about the ETFs, right? Your neighbor told you, started investing into index funds in 2000, yes? By the way,
yep.
ETFs and index funds only came to Europe in the 2010, 2012, right? We didn't even have index funds before that in Europe. Okay, but your neighbor has been buying stocks. Let's say your neighbor has been buying stocks, and you are a conservative German, and you say, no, I have everything in my savings account. You're an idiot for buying stocks, right? So for 20 years, he's buying stocks, and you are saving, and he's making bank and buying a new Mercedes every 2 years and going on best vacations. And you see this and you think, I'm right. And then after 20 years, you decide, okay, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe he's right. I'll also buy some stocks. And you know what you'll do then? You're not going to go, 99% of the people are not going to go and buy Apple and the NASDAQ and the S&P. They're going to look for some Canadian biotech startup in some stupid forum because they think they're now the smartest people on the planet and they are going to find the next Apple and the next Amazon, right? And that's the same thing that happens with Bitcoin. There's many people looking at this and saying, yeah, but it's been around. And they feel they have missed their chance, and then they go into something else. And I can tell you this from experience because I'm the Bitcoin guy. So when in a bull market, I cannot go. I have two little kids, right? In the bull markets, when I go to kids' parties, my wife hates it because all the guys are standing in a circle and telling me what shitcoins they bought.
Oh God, that just compounds how miserable kids' parties are for you. I bet.
I just
That sounds
slowly get drunk.
horrendous.
So, I mean, one of the things that we touched on earlier, very, very briefly, is digital euro. The whole conversation we're having about digital dollars, CBDCs. I mean, for me, I find that conversation utterly terrifying. The fact, I mean, I view this as the ultimate final nail in the coffin on what will be governmental tyranny. And I think it's going to be horrendous. As a Bitcoiner yourself, do you see it similarly, or do you see upsides of digital currencies, digital CBDCs?
So no, I don't see any real upsides. I mean, I do understand the main issue. Um, Cash is like the core product of a fiat money system, and the only legal tender is cash. It's the only thing that's produced directly by the central banks. And in a digitized world, especially with Bitcoin already being there, of course they need to come up with something. Because in a completely digitized world, and this is especially interesting from the European perspective, I do see that they don't want to be completely dependent on Apple and MasterCard and Visa, right?
Of course, why
You also
you
have to
can't
see
be
this
that becomes a geopolitical risk.
exactly, and you have to see this from a geopolitical perspective. So geopolitically, Europe and Asia and Russia and China, everybody wants to get out of the dollar. Everybody wants to get rid of the
Yep.
dollar and its dominance. So, and they've tried many times. The euro is one way they've tried, and it was actually quite successful in a way. But the Americans are very, very smart in what they do. So the thing
They're
is
very
that
corrupt in what they do as well.
yeah, but it usually works out for them. It usually works out for them. For at least for the last 100 years. So the thing is that yes, you can use CBDCs as basically a way to build up payments and financial infrastructure that is independent of the US. That is something that the Europeans are very interested in, and that's why they are going to push the digital euro. When it comes to personal liberties, of course, it's it's the absolute dog shit. I mean, there's no way around this. I mean, they are going to claim that it's going to be anonymous, but of course, it's not going to be anonymous, and stuff like that. So that's one. That the other part. Then there's the third part. We don't even know if it's ever going to be done. But what is interesting is that the Americans are not so interested in central bank digital currencies anyway, because they already have the system that works, right? They don't. I mean, when you read Sultan Posa, he also talks about the Americans shouldn't even try doing the digital dollar because the dollar is already top dog. You don't change a winning system, and the Americans have ironically a better understanding of to be mindful of the federal government. In Europe, it's different. In Europe, the parts that are done by the European Union, nobody thinks about, nobody talks about it. There's no real critique of structural changes. I mean, the digital euro would be the biggest change in our monetary arrangement since the introduction of the euro, and we should have a huge debate about this. But of course, there is none. But the main thing I would say about digital government currencies is that they are very much a reaction, not only to Bitcoin, but to the whole digitalization of the private sector. Even in China, the digital yuan is an answer to WeChat and Alipay. And in a way, if they would not be working on this, people would also be complaining. Why are you not thinking about digital cash? What are you doing, right? And rightly so. I mean, they would be complaining. But of course, as somebody who does not like the idea of central banking in general, I'm not going to be for the digital euro.
I mean, so unfortunately, I think we exist in a reality where the central banking system that exists is not going away anytime in the near future. I mean,
yes, I agree.
Regardless of how they are structured and how they might be reformed, I don't see them going away at any meaningful point in our lifetime. That's just the unfortunate reality we have to live in. Now, do you see a world where a CBDC, or what would be the features of a CBDC? Because I think that is inevitable to a certain extent. Exactly like you said, it is reactionary. It might be to Bitcoin. It's because the world is becoming digitized, etc. What features could you see built into such CBDC that would alleviate any major concerns that you would have over its implementation? Or is there even anything that could alleviate those concerns? And again, mind you, I'm saying, like, obviously you and I would probably say just get rid of the central banking system, and that would be the only way to fix this. But if we assume the reality, central banks are there, they're not going anywhere, what would you do to at least protect the individual sovereignty?
It's an interesting question. So if there is any way, I don't know it, but if there's any way to doing this technically in a way where people can see and can like have proof of their privacy being protected. I don't know if that's possible, but that would be interesting. I mean, there is the technical side, and then there is the monetary policy side. So they can never do anything about the monetary policy because they are just locked into their system, right? And that is something that scares me even more than the surveillance. I mean, we had negative interest rates in Europe, and there are enough economists who think have you ever heard the term the zero lower bound?
Yes.
So it's a central banking term for we can't push the interest rate even lower because cash still exists. God damn it, that's the zero lower bound, right? That's the thing.
They did it anyway.
Yeah, but not as low as they wanted to.
Yeah.
Because we had in Germany we had giant corporations just renting out safes and putting cash in there, right? That happened. So I don't know if there's any way they can do this to be. I mean, of course, if you had a payment system that would run on fiat money, and I expect fiat money to live for a long time. If you had a payment system that runs on fiat money that you can rely on, that technically works and that is free for me to use, like cash is, maybe I would use it, for small amounts, like I use cash for small amounts. I have never thought that far. Of course, maybe doing it on the Lightning Network or even including Bitcoin into the mix somehow might even work, but I don't think that they are going to do that anytime soon.
No, the only way that would work is if they decide that fiat currencies have to have an element of real asset backing, right? So maybe, I mean, and I think it's what Tim Draper always goes out and says, that it's inevitable that Bitcoin will be a part of a basket that backs fiat currency. While I would love to see that happen, I don't see that ever happening whatsoever. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to remember governments need to be able to finance themselves. And unfortunately, our governments have figured out they can effectively infinitely finance themselves. And unfortunately, at least if you're the United States, you're in a state of perpetual war, more or less, basically perpetual self-made war. And you'll never be able to finance a war if your circulating supply of your own currency is capped based on the amount of real assets backing your fiat currency. It's just never going to work. But
I mean,
yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, you do.
I mean, so I've had a few thoughts about how I would think, I mean, and granted, I'm not the world's best economist by any means. Someone infinitely smarter than I am is going to have to actually sit down and put pen to paper and think about this. But I mean, when I think about the CBDCs, what could be built in? What features could be built in to limit the tyranny that it could theoretically impose? Everything I come up with ends up becoming superficial to me because the money itself cannot be programmable. Like, there are heads of state, there are heads of central banks that are talking about, okay, there will be an expiry date on money. Any dollars, any digital euros above a certain savings threshold, if it's not spent, it dissipates or it loses, or they tax it or something like that, right?
I mean,
like, that's just horrifying.
I mean, yes. I mean, this idea has been around, and it was actually tried in Austria in between the wars. It was called the Wörgler. It's the idea of Silvio Xell. It's called Schwundgeld. I don't even know what the English term is, but it's basically you give out money and it loses its value and it has an expiration date. And they actually tried this in China with the CBDC, at least in one small scale experiment. But I think that, inflation is also expiring the money, but it's not, but you don't tell anyone. And that
that's
works
exactly
a lot better.
Exactly.
So I don't think that they were going to do anything. I don't think that they are going to do anything that's just overtly horrible, right? Because that's not how it works. You introduce it slowly, and so I don't think that they are going to, if they want to fight inflation, that they just go into your account and take your money away so you can't spend it. I don't think it's going to work like that. I think
I would hope not, but they've been talking about that.
Similar
to how they've been talking about that only certain purchases and only certain goods are going to be permitted to be purchased. And again, what was even worse, I think it was the head of the.
What it means. Think about this in practice, Pat. Think about this. So we live in the same city, right? And we all have a quota for. No. This is an idea now. This is just an experiment, right?
Because I thought you said you were in Vienna.
No, I'm in Vienna. So let's say we live in the same city and we both have a quota for how much meat we're allowed to buy, right?
Yep.
Because it's bad for the environment, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So let's say I exceeded my quota on Wednesday, but I still want to have schnitzel on Thursday. So what do? I call up my friend Pat and says, "How about your quota?" And you tell me, "Yeah, I can have I still have 2 schnitzels left." And I'm like, "What's your price in Bitcoin?" Right? It doesn't work in practice.
I actually never thought about that.
You'll have a black market for like schnitzel quotas springing up within like a week.
You've convinced me that I got to go open a Schnitzelhaus in the near future.
No, I know Pat. If I know Pat, he's not giving up his schnitzel for any amount of money.
So
no,
that's
God,
the
no.
one thing. But the thing with the upper limit, that is interesting, because why are they talking about having a digital euro, but you can only have 3,000 euros on your account, right? And if you go over there, it goes into your classic or your standard bank account. Why are they doing that? Because they understand that they are basically undermining the banking system by introducing the digital euro. It's actually, if you want to go really, you're a libertarian, you want to go really conspiracy theorist, okay, let's do it. The 5th point in Marx's Communist Manifesto is one nation, one bank. That's what it says. There's only one bank and it does everything, right? So
it's kind of like Monopoly.
Yeah, today we don't have a centralized banking system. We have a decentralized banking systems where every bank is working basically as a node, right? And Bitcoin is not actually decentralized. We always like to say it's decentralized. It's distributed. It's not decentralized. It's distributed. So it's even more wider spread than this. But what I'm saying here is this: I've never met a banker who likes the idea of a digital euro. And then the next question would be, how many things that bankers didn't like you think were implemented in the last 150 years? That they really hated?
Some of the banks hated the TARP cash injections.
Yeah. Because they made them look bad.
But those were the healthy banks, but they realized they had to do it anyway. I think banks have hated the liquidity provisions, the liquidity requirements put on them. Depending on what type of bank you were, you certainly had a different opinion about Glass-Steagall, right? Like if you're a JP Morgan, Glass-Steagall gets repealed. Fuck, that's incredible. You're a Morgan Stanley, you go, shit, that's awful. Now I got to get an investment bank and I got to get a trading book. I can't be a retail bank only anymore. There's things I'm sure certain bankers haven't liked.
Sure. My argument is, if I were a banker, I would put everything I had lobbying-wise behind stopping this. The same goes for national governments. And that's what you see in Florida and in it's not national governments, but it's state governments, but it's national governments in Europe. Because the thing is that today you have a situation where Why is inflation still so high? Because even with the central bank trying to put the brakes on and hiking rates, right? Well, one reason is, and Russell Napier, he's brilliant. He talks a lot about this. One reason is that the governments are just circumventing the central banks and are producing money by giving out money, by especially like the main thing they do is credit guarantees. I think in Italy, the government already guarantees more than 100% of outstanding loans. And that's perfect because they don't have to print money. They don't have to. It doesn't go on their government debt, but basically they just guarantee it. And if you fail on your loan, if you default on your loan, they pay for it. And
Yeah,
what
but
I'm
that
saying
system
is that
doesn't
that's what's
work.
called
That's what the U.S. does with student loans. I mean that system. What inevitably happens is people become because we have that system in the U.S. around student loans. The U.S. government, the federal government, guarantees any and all student loans, right? Which is why universities end up becoming wildly expensive, and why you have this complete moral hazard around underwriting of student loans because you can't lose money on it, even if the student defaults. I mean, okay, the student may have done a bullshit degree and their life might be ruined forever, but I mean, hey, who gives a shit? I still made my money on the loan. And so that system, I mean,
there are very, very strong interest groups that do not want to see a central bank digital currency. That's what I'm saying. And besides the
so
big
that gives
funders.
me hope that maybe one day we won't see one. I mean, I'm horrified by what a CBDC entails, particularly the elements around programmable money. I hope we don't see them in the near future. But in the interest of time, because unfortunately I'm 5 minutes overdue for a call I had to be on, I think we're going to have to wrap up here. But Niko, we have to get you back on at some point in the near future to flesh out this CBDC conversation a bit further. I think there's a lot that we can unpack here over time.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks for having me. It was great.
Yeah, really appreciate having you on the show. We'll get you back again sometime soon. Have a good one.
You too.